Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here. We appreciate everybody coming this evening. So here's an overview of our agenda, just our normal reminders. We're going to have Steve will go through the treasurers, the meeting minutes, and our new topic that we're going to be covering every month, the development zoning. And then we have our speaker, Commissioner Ruane, and community updates, and go from there. So just our reminders again, please to mute your cell phones. And if you do need a conversation, we ask that you please take it outside in respect for our speakers. Thank you. Okay, so with that, Steve, it's on you.
Yeah, okay, so it is working. And I think this screen is obviously not working, so you'll have to look here or turn around and look behind you. We got great screens back there. So for the month of November, we had a couple of expenses. The expense for renting the church, and we had an expense for GoDaddy, which is our website, our hosting service. Thank you very much. We had interest earned on our deposits, some deposits from both Zephy and cash for memberships. We ended up with a net income of $68 for the month. Deb? Yeah, thank you. So income year to date, income's about a little over $5,200. Total expenses of about $3,700. Our net income was a little over $1,500. You can see, I pointed this out before, but our biggest expenses, we pay $100 to rent this out every month. So we'll have $1,200 worth of expenses for facility rentals and then insurance. We carry directors and officers and general liability insurance, and that's about $1,400 if I'm not mistaken. So that's on a year-to-date basis. Yeah, that's, thank you. There we go. So I because the board has asked me to, each month I do a total of our essentially cash balances. They asked me to keep a balance of above $10,000. As you can see there, it's a little $13,500, so certainly meeting that. And you can see our CDs there. We have a certificate of deposit that matures on the 10th of this month, and so I'll be looking to break that up and get that invested. As I've said numerous times, I'm trying to get some money that matures every month. Which will allow us to actually take that balance, that $13,000 balance down, because we'll have money coming due every month. And slowly but surely I'm getting there. So any questions on that? Okay, so I guess the next is the minutes of the meeting. As I promised last time, this time I actually got them posted to our website about two and a half weeks ago. Hopefully that's going to be ongoing, so that if you feel compelled to go out and look at our minutes, they'll be there a couple of weeks actually before the meeting. I think I had just done it the day before at the last meeting, and I promised that I'd get it out sooner. Obviously kind of hard to read. I don't know if anybody's looked at it. I would ask for a motion to approve, and then a second. Thank you, Ellen. Sue? Yes. So is anybody opposed? I'll ask it that way. So we'll adopt those, the minutes of the last general meeting, which was on November 4th. Oh, okay. So just very quickly, because I know we all want to hear Kevin speak, Commissioner Ruane, I should say. But last month, we mentioned to the people that were here that we have started a development committee. And I had done quite a bit of work on getting all sort of the zoning and the development issues that were outstanding into a single report. I did that at the last meeting, and it was a lot of work, and I asked for people to volunteer to work alongside me to really make this more robust. And we essentially promised that beginning in January, we would come after that first initial update of all the projects and bring things to your attention that maybe have changed on those projects. Maybe we know more about those projects or the zoning requests or whatever the case might be. So that's what we're shooting for. I was lucky enough that 6 people stood up and volunteered to participate with me. Matt Otto volunteered, Skylyn Brown, thank you Skylyn, Sue, our illustrious Sue, Alice, thank you, Jonathan Wagner in the back, and Lee McKibben. So we've already had a meeting. Yeah, thanks. It's a lot of hard work. And we've already had sort of our first training session. I've gotten very familiar with all the Lee County services where we can go look up information, and I've begun the training process, and so that's going well. The only other thing I would say is if you come in January and you expect this big update, I did that last month. The reality is zoning and development issues are like watching paint dry. It's very, very slow process. So don't expect that there's going to be a lot of updates every time, but maybe there's one nugget. Some months we're going to come and say, hey, there's really nothing that new to report. What I will say is that we're finding out more information. As we become sleuths and we look around and we ask questions, we are finding out a lot more information than we knew as I was doing it. So I appreciate that the work the group has done, and people are really taking it to heart and really trying to look into this stuff and sort of understand it. My task to them was I assigned a couple of projects to each person, or a team of a couple of people, and just said, look, know these as intimately as you possibly can, all the details, so that we could speak logically on what's going on, whether they're development or zoning exceptions or whatever the case might be. So I'll stop there. I'd take any questions, or we can get on to Commissioner Ruane. Anybody? Okay.
Thank you, Steve. So as we all know, Commissioner Ruane is here and will speak about 5 topics that we've asked him to address for us this evening. And he will advise how he wants the questions to be taken, whether it's per topic or however. And when you do want to ask a question, just a reminder, please come up to this microphone so the online streaming can see and hear. So without any further delay, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to any citizens anytime I'm able to do so. And it's where we get feedback like this that helps us do things. So the first topic that you all wanted me to talk about is 2020 and conservation. So there's been some concern voiced by a couple of activist groups that Lee County doesn't want to fund 2020 properties anymore, which is the furthest thing from the truth. Lee County has historically looked at any piece of property that makes sense. We have a subcommittee which basically looks at each property that we have for consideration, and they score it based on merit. In economies that start to slow down, what we're seeing is a much more robust properties that are submitted to us for 2020 consideration. The intent, honestly, when the market starts to slow down is when developers can't develop their property, they think it's just easy to give it to Lee County and we'll buy it for 2020. So that's just not the normal process. Right now, currently, there's $60 million worth of properties that have been submitted to Lee County, and it's continued to grow. Why is that? Commercial, residential, certainly there's softness in the economy. There's not a lot of people that believe that they're going to fill up these commercial centers. Housing certainly seems to be that. If you look at some of the surrounding areas, you start to see vacancies at 30 and 40%. You'll see when the economy starts to change gears, you'll start to see indicators that the economy is getting soft. When you have 3 or 4 years ago, when everyone was complaining about the high rents and people complaining about that, there was valid parts of that. Now you're having tenant landlords basically offering 2 months free rent to rent an apartment. So it's really changed dramatically. Some of the bigger establishments, as I drove here along Cape Coral Parkway coming back from the county, there's a big establishment that was built on Cape Coral Parkway called the Cove. It's only 30% occupied. There's another big development in Cape Coral. That one also has major tenancy vacancies throughout it. So the challenge we have is how do we continue to buy properties without being inundated with properties that don't make sense for 2020. The second part of what we've tried to do to address the citizenry is more and more of our constituents have indicated that 2020 properties they want to use for parks as well. So we not only purchased the piece of property, we have to maintain the piece of property, but now we're developing pieces of property so there's walking trails and hiking trails. Despite the fact that we have, in excess of 1,000 parks in Lee County, we now have 37,000 acres worth of 2020 property that we're trying to develop in really reaction to what the constituents asked us for. So we are committed to 2020. We have over $100 million in reserves. I've asked to have a workshop so the public is aware of just the overwhelming demand from different developers that are asking us to buy their property. And the reason we have a subcommittee is we go through a pretty thorough ranking of each piece of property to make sure it scores and meets criteria for 2020. The whole concept of 2020 was to try to contain growth, to try to help water quality, because obviously with less development, you have less runoff and less impediments that obviously are going to impact water. So those are the underlying reasons. I can assure every one of you, having been in government now going into my 19th year, I and all the board are committed to 2020. There's not one piece of property that has been submitted to us that had valid points to it that we didn't purchase. So I don't know what concerns people have. I'll certainly just stop at this point. I'll answer whatever questions relative to 2020 that anyone might have.
One of the concerns that people had was that there is no funding in 2020, or that it was going to run out with the latest grant first.
So, I mean, again, the way back several years ago, there used to be a set aside 5 mils for 2020. That's where that came about. We were told that was unconstitutional, so we were unable to continue to do that. But we have over $100 million worth of reserves. I think what people were looking for is us to move $40 million over to 2020. And instead of just, whenever you move reserves into a unrestricted to a restricted area, you then have to then change legislation and bring it back into unrestricted. So if I moved $40 million and didn't have $40 million worth of properties presented to us, it's easy to move money as you transfer them and as valid applications.
So I don't understand. The statute says you have to have X amount of dollars minimum of.
The statute says that we are required to transfer $40 million. It doesn't say
Right.
when.
Right.
So we have $100 million of what's known as unassigned
Okay.
reserves. So if it made the public feel comfortable, I brought up at the budget shop, let's have a workshop and I'll gladly move the $40 million over. It's just that if there's not properties in excess of
To
$40 million,
purchase.
then we have excess capacity. So what I'm trying to do is have a workshop. We haven't had this conversation in a long time. So we can talk as commissioners, do what do we do? Because right now the intent was for us to allocate $40 million a year. Currently we have over $60 million and growing worth of applications. So one of the questions I want to ask my fellow commissioners, because we have to do everything we do in sunshine. So I have to have those conversations. So what do we do when we go over 40 million? If we have $40 million worth of worthwhile properties, I want to be able to fund those. I don't think we should limit a dollar amount if they're worthwhile projects. The real issue we have is many of the projects that are listed and submitted to us are really because they've been 2 or 3 or 4 years of nobody wanting to buy the piece of property.
Not worthwhile, sure.
So I don't want to be the catcher's mitt.
And is that where the tier system comes from then?
Correct, correct. So the opportunity when I got on the commission 5 years ago was to come up with a tier program. Tier 1, obviously, highest scoring ones. Tier 2 are not. So we're trying to differentiate what is obviously impactful, what not. When there's, it might be tier 2, but it might connect to other properties, so that's more valuable to us. Or if it gives us access to waterways or gives us access to working in conjunction with state or federal partners, we want to look at that. So those are factors that the scoring mechanism doesn't necessarily take into consideration, but we have the ability to look at that because there might have overriding factors when we want to do that. But right now, my biggest concern is I don't want developers to believe when they don't have confidence to develop their property, they could just give it to Lee County and we have an obligation to buy the property. I don't think that makes sense in any business.
Right.
I buy in excess. We have to buy what we do. But all the commissioners at the meeting, the budget hearing, and many others are all committed to this program. And it does balance growth in a way that I think is helpful. And it really is a underlying quality for water quality that people don't realize. The less development, the less runoff, the less issues you have, and then you have less impediments in the water.
And more area for flood waters to go. One related question, several years ago, the county purchased for 2020 a property near the, I believe it was the Winn-Dixie or the Buttonwood Preserve, that was supposed to be operated as a dog park and to hold hurricane debris as needed. And that, nothing's happened with that yet.
The 2020 under the statute, that's one of the questions that have come up, are supposed to be for conservation. They're supposed to be for people to use and enjoy. They're not supposed to be for dog parks. So that
So
is
there's
something.
an issue with that, okay.
Well, there is, just if you think about it,
Sure.
the byproduct that a dog actually will leave behind.
Not exactly conservationist.
Correct,
right?
and not necessarily, believe it or not, the fecal matter ends up in the waterways and it's going to impact our water quality. So the intent, we want to listen to the constituent, but we have to obviously be reasonable what the parks are for. Because again, these are 2020 properties. We're now developing into parks. We now want to do dog parks, and now we're doing hurricane debris. Hurricane debris is something we can do temporarily where we'll carve a piece of property and we'll use that just to allow many of our areas to have an access to be able to bring their debris if they're frustrated. I mean, I think with all the storms we had since I've been a commissioner, it's just been too much debris, not enough people to pick it up, not quick enough to pick it up. So we're trying to give alternatives where we don't impact the property in a negative way. So that's kind of why we did that.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about 2020?
Just real quick, can you comment on the status of the 2020 potential purchase at Redfish Point in Cape Coral?
So it's in my backyard, and I can tell you that it has failed twice. There's not one commissioner at Cape Coral that has voted for that. It's coming back up in January. I plan on going there as a citizen to obviously make my comments known. Joe Mazurkowicz, who's a former mayor of Cape Coral, is helping the developer try to work through staff, and staff's rejected that twice. I can't imagine knowing and having talked to every single council member in Cape Coral that there's one vote out there for Redfish. And quite frankly, I don't know what you do, because what people don't realize when you buy a piece of property like that, so if you come up Pelican, you'd have to make Pelican 4 lanes. The impact that that would have on that surrounding area gets into where smart growth makes sense. And I can tell you that every board member has been briefed on that, and every board member is ready, willing, and able, because they gave me the authority to sit down with Joe Mazurkowicz and have a conversation. Joe would like to bifurcate the property, selling us a piece, but then also agreeing to that we'll let him develop the property. Unfortunately, that's not a deal I want to obviously do. So as far as where I'm concerned, I don't think that's going to have any legs to it whatsoever, because you don't even have one, and staff turned it down. So staff not only turned it down at the building development stages, but then the commission has been very consistent in Cape Coral that nobody wants to do it. So I think that's going to be dead on arrival. But I will be there at the January meeting to certainly speak opposing it. And I'm just doing it as a citizen of Cape Coral where I live. So, yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner, I think it'd be nice for people to understand the process for 2020. You know, the property owner has to nominate the property to the board, to the committee. The committee has to have their technical people review the property and then make a decision of whether they want to forward to nominate the property to the.
So you're right. We came up with a subcommittee called Class Action Land Acquisition, and it's called CLA. That board has multiple members on it. What we're finding with the board is there's not a piece of property they don't like. and that's why we came up with a scoring criteria, because we wanted to have a tier 1 and a tier 2 process. So what happens is you're a developer, you submit the property to Lee County, it gets worked internally by staff, and it's presented to the CLA subgroup. They basically go through it and come up with a scoring mechanism, and then we obviously have the opportunity to look at that, ask whatever questions necessary to do that. That's the list I'm talking about that have over $60 million worth of properties, and after my briefing yesterday, there's another 12 applications that have been submitted. So we're looking like we're getting close to about $85 to $90 million worth of properties. We just received one in Captiva for a little over an acre that they'd like $13 million for. That's, I don't know what you do with an acre property when you think about 2020. So it's
But
just
then the
comes
next
to-
process, after you guys approve going forward with it, the committee has to go back and negotiate the final price with the landowners.
So what happens is if the commission, what we're supposed to do to have a complete project is there's supposed to be at least 2 appraisals, okay? And we pick the lower of the 2 appraisals, and that's what we'll do as a fair market value. We then send it back to the subcommittee, they go through it, they go through any other issues, they then come back up to us, and we obviously move forward with that. So it's a rather lengthy process that we have. I'm just trying to make sure everyone in Lee County understands that we're not going to be the catcher's mitt for every piece of property that you think that you don't want to sell. And it becomes somewhat disheartening when you have a developer come to you and say, well, I couldn't sell it for 3 years, so I'll sell it to you, and I'll take a discount. I'm like, well, what discount are you taking? Because if the property wasn't sold, what discount are you? I mean, market is basically a byproduct of, is there a willing buyer? Is there a willing seller? And can you come up with a price? You know, again, it's just, there's just a shift in this economy over the last year where we've seen an avalanche, and I use that word not disrespectful, but just an avalanche of applications that we're doing. And again, you're seeing the list that has us to review them. I can't tell you the number of properties we reject that don't even make the scoring criteria, that staff goes through and won't even recommend it. So that's where, you know, the background has been. I know that one active group was indicating that we weren't going to fund 2020 anymore, but I could tell you it was someone that's been on the board, someone that obviously governed in an area that conservation makes a lot of sense. I will always advocate for 2020 because it just makes sense in all the things that we're trying to preserve. You know, smart growth, water quality, and give obviously what the constituents want. If we need to obviously go back to some creative way of funding, if that becomes an issue, then we'll obviously go back to the voters and say, okay, if we're averaging 60 million a year, you know, what is our preference? Because we're going to have to somehow come up with the additional $20 million. And that's where it becomes challenging.
I think for the members here, everybody's up in the air about the property across from the 58 acres across from Winn-Dixie. And I just want everybody to understand that we're in that final negotiating price, getting the proposal, the appraisals, and making the decision, making a final offer to the landowner. So that's where we are in that process. It's still ongoing, but that's where we are in the final stages.
And the most important thing is we will only pay fair market value on the lower appraisal. So I think that's one of the things we do. And sometimes, depending on the dollar amount, we might need to do 3 appraisals. Right. So that's really where we try to do our due diligence, making sure that we have come up with a fair value. And, you know, most times developers have a different value in their mind. So even when we go through the process, we think it's a, you know, a good property, you know, the developer says, well, it's 10 million, I need 15. Well, we're not in a ability to try to overpay for a piece of property. If it's only fair market value at 10 million, I can't give you what you'd like.
So along that line, all the properties that you got that does 90 million, almost approaching 90 million, that's really what the landowners are wanting to sell it for, not really what the final.
Correct, correct. And again, we're just noticing an awful lot of additional applications when it comes to 2020.
Number one, Commissioner, kudos to Pamela in your office. She rocks. So if she's here tonight,
No, she's not. She has
Just,
bronchitis.
she's done wonderful things. So, but my question is, how fast? You say 100 million reserves. How much is added every year to that reserve?
So the reserves will fluctuate from a low point of about 75 million to a high point of about 100 million.
Each year.
So each year, what basically happens, so if you have $75 million in reserves, and we don't use those, we roll it into the next year.
Okay, so we're at 100 million now. We could be at 175?
No, I
No,
mean, so.
okay, that's what
so,
I'm asking.
You know, so
How
we
much does it
roll over,
increase?
so whenever you do a budget, a budget that you'll budget X dollars. Until you appropriate them and spend them, you haven't spent them.
Okay.
So we look at reserves in a very, very conservative way. We use those for emergencies. That's what they're intended to do. So we don't deplete those, and what we've had a habit of doing is not necessarily go into that.
Okay, but we're paying taxes in to support 2020?
So you're paying, the millage rate, as I indicated before, is 1 millage rate today.
Okay.
Back in yesteryear, there used to be 5 mills set aside for 2020. Okay,
Okay.
that was taken away because that was unconstitutional.
Okay,
So we are basically using the regular ad valorem millage rate that we've had,
okay,
and that's how we come up with money, and that's how we set aside funds. And what we always make sure we do is we have enough in reserves to do that, because in the same alternative, if we came up with $40 million worth of purchases, and there was another $10 million worth of acceptable applications, we would move the money out of reserves. And then next year, we'd walk into that budget year with 50 million, and we'd have to allocate money out of our budget, put them in reserves. We always go
Okay.
back and replenish reserves when we deplete them.
all right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on 2020? Okay. So the second item that I'm talking about is retiring aging development orders. And we've made significant progress since I met this group. So we are down to 147 cases that are issued, but we've closed out 353. There's 109 that are dormant and are blank, and there's 11 waiting for application. So of the 147 that are left on the list, we are working with Nadine and Steve. We're going through item by item to see. The problem we have with development orders when they're issued is there's a very small bar the legislators put for a development order to stay active. So all you need to do is do something in a period of time and it stays active. So what we're trying to do in a proactive way is to call who has that development order and ask, are you really doing anything with this property? And having a robust conversation about, this has been on the books for 15 or 20 years, and you do exactly the required just to keep the permit open. So what's our intent? What are you trying to do with it? I'm really happy to see, because that number when I first got in office had another zero to it. So we've been making significant progress. When you have over 1,400 properties that are still with active permits, there's some consternation. We're down to 147, so we're trying to move through that process as quick as we can. I'm happy that both Steve and Nadine are working on this, and we're going through every item. So we will continue to do that. I want to make sure that we email and make sure we give you the updated progress, because it's something that we have allocated staff to do, and we have come up with, I think, a great way of trying to see what is truly the number we have outstanding. The other issue is, as I'm talking to legislators, we talk about some of the issues, because the fourth topic is home rule, and legislators have a tendency to try to make one legislation fit all. And part of the issue they have is they don't understand the administrative burdens they're placing on us by having such a low bar or low criteria to meet to keep that open. Because if I look back and look at the staff time, since everyone up in Tallahassee continues to say they want us to be efficient, well, you're putting an impediment on us for us not to be efficient. Because I have endless hours of staff time that continue to have to look at this list. And we don't want it, you don't want it, and the legislators basically came up with a rule that is, you know, certainly antiquated to say the least, and probably really not appropriate. So, any questions on that? Well, sure.
While the gentleman's coming up. So in reviewing the most recent list, there was one in particular where it said awaiting applicant, but I know that the work was done already. So how does that work?
So that's one of the issues we have when people do work without registering it, getting a development permit. That's some of the issues we have. That's why we had a robust conversation about code development. You know, code compliance, code enforcement, because it is not uncommon for people to develop their properties and they either use unlicensed contractors, they do it by themselves. And the challenge you have when you go through like a storm, and again, if you go back in history, a lot of these from storms, is there's this urgent desire to try to get back in your home, and we respect that. The problem is that we're trying to come up with a criteria that makes sense for it to obviously have to be developed. And I think some of the confusion comes in with like sheetrock and some, what I think are cosmetics. Trying to have a real conversation about mechanicals and certain things that obviously create a potential liability. Where if you want to paint something and you want to put a kitchen cabinet and you're just really changing the cabinet out, we're trying to look at that a little differently. Because again, if you touch anything in the mechanical stage, so that would be, you know, fire, plumbing, heating, HVAC, those are the things we're very concerned about. But if you put in a granite countertop or a solid surface, I don't know that I have the same consternation over that.
So can I just add to that?
Sure.
Just having done this development work, I just see the lack of people getting permits to do things they need to do rampant on this island. People putting stuff up and then coming back and asking for forgiveness. You know, my whole thing to come before you today was to say we need help because there's stuff going up that we absolutely know, and I've talked to your staff, many things where they just put stuff up and then they say, what do I have to do? Or they don't even bother. So I would just ask you if there's anything we can do to enforce code enforcement so that people are actually doing what they're
So
supposed to do.
anytime you see a property that you know is being developed, report to us. As you heard today in code enforcement, what we're trying to do is come up with policy tools to obviously have compliance. That's what we want to do. At the end of the day, people say to me, why don't you do this, Commissioner, this, Commissioner? I'm here to make policy decisions. And what I understand is the greatest deterrent is when you have a fine that is significant. As you heard today in code enforcement, some of the fines aren't worthwhile enough, so people break them.
Yes, yes.
And that's what we're trying to do is I asked today in the workshop for us to go through the 5 different areas in code enforcement, and one of them obviously is properties, to understand what are the impediments, what do I have to do for staff to obviously have a more robust process through this. It was also the Sheriff's Department want to help us to augment our staff, so we're trying to look at some of the flexible ways we could do that, because when they're out in the community and we're aware of a particular area or areas, or we're aware of a particular property, if I have boots on the ground, we want to utilize those boots as quickly as possible. The biggest concern we have in an area, and having governed in a older community when I governed in Sanibel, is you have concerns that people don't know who's licensed, who's not. So there's an education component as well. We're trying to make sure the lists are on the website. I always tell people if you go get a bid and it's $10,000 and then someone comes in at $2,000, you have to ask yourself why, okay? But that happens all the time, and many times people say, you know, I'll take $1,000 down, and people think, I did great. I remember having this conversation with my father-in-law. He said, but it's cheaper. I said, Tom, but you don't even know if it's being done legitimately, and they may do some more damage to your home or your structure, and God forbid you have a fire or something. So part of it is educating the community, and we're trying to do that. We also talked about, when I was chairman, to have more open houses and more areas where we'd go to in the community. So Pine Island being one, Lehigh Acres, and coming out and trying to have an open house where we have more robust conversations with the community to try to be more proactive in this. These are the times where, as the economy starts to slow down, you have the opportunity, because you have your staff, to do more things. When you're going through the Hurricane 5 that we just went through, and right after the pandemic, the growth that we were going through was unprecedented. So trying to keep up with all that without adding staff was a challenge. Now we have staff, and we're trying to find better ways to be more efficient. But it gives me a lot of concern when you have a community that is trying to cut corners, and I respect that. But if you're actually circumventing the law, you're potentially putting yourself and your neighbors in danger. And that's the bigger concern I have as an elected official. Other questions on that? Yes?
Everything was answered. Thank you.
No problem.
Smarter than I.
Thank you for coming, Commissioner Ruane. I appreciate you being here. So one of my one development orders that I have brought to you over and over and over again happened to be one that was back in '83 approved. And it's still sitting relatively dormant. Like last time, I think they put up some plumbing walls. So the question on that one is, there's been underground that was approved 30 years ago, and it's been sitting dormant and doing nothing except rotting, breaking off, and so on, and not even complete. That's another story. But so these are some of the development orders that really need to be addressed. And what is, if they actually get a building up and running, and they're using a 30-year-old sewer system or fresh water system that's been in the ground, but never used, never capped off, never maintained, none of that. So the people that would come in and actually own these condos are unsuspecting. So where's our...
So development orders aren't necessarily finalized. So you can't just take a development. So there's a very small bar to continue to have the development order be active. Okay, doesn't mean you can go develop it, because you're still going to have to meet today's standards when you come to us. That's the challenge. So 30 years ago, because I passed it, and if we have 5 new improvements in the code, you have to adhere to today's code, not 30 years ago, because you haven't developed the property 30 years ago, and you don't get grandfathered in.
I had heard that partially, but the problem was it was approved and completed in the paperwork. So therefore,
if there's a specific item or items, I'll gladly look at those, but we're down to 147.
Yeah, but what about the one in '83?
But again, what's 147 is what's active that has any type of criteria that's moved, and I go back 30 years from ago. So there's only 147 left. I mean, when I came to this group, there was another 0 to that.
Yeah.
And probably 3,000. So we've made considerable, if
that.
there's a particular one that is a pebble, a rock, a boulder in your shoe, we'll address that. And quite frankly, I appreciate the kudos for Pamela. I've been working with Pamela for the 19 years I've been in office. So I wouldn't do this job without her. So if you just let her know, trust me, what Pamela knows about government, which helps me a great deal, my job is to make policy. She does the legwork to understand what are the issues. She can go to staff. She can interact with them. Because most people don't realize, I have 4 employees. That's all I have. As a commissioner, I have county manager, county attorney, executive director of the Port Authority, and a hearing examiner. I can't pick up the phone and go to Mickey in community services. I have to ask Dave Hardner, can I talk to Mickey? And that's what it is. So staff to staff is a lot easier, so that's what Pamela does. She will intervene and not have to wait for the county manager to say yes. So that's what she does for me. And she does it, she's been in county government, or government in general, in the last 28 years. So she knows how to work through the channels that makes my job a lot easier. But if there's a specific issue, tell me which ones we're not getting to, and to give you consultation. But if you just want to contact her and say it's A, B, and C, or it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, But there's only 147, so I can't imagine they're all in the stage we're talking about.
Some are stickier than the others. Just one more quick on that particular one. It actually touches conservation area. So if they would ever come forward to you guys, that part of that area would make great conservation, and it would also have a partial building there for a actual community center for Pine Island at some point. So, and he has never finished it, but, you know.
Okay.
So if it ever comes forward, hey.
Any other questions on?
Yes, do you have a deadline on any new development orders coming in? That they're going to be done by 5 years or 10 years, or they revert back?
So what the legislator's done is has a criteria that if you meet one of the criterias, the permit gets extended for another 5 years. So that's one of the, again, one of the things I've learned is if you sit down during non-legislative sessions and you talk about the issues that you are faced with, you know, I think the state legislators try to come up with a rule to govern the 413 cities that exist in Florida and the 67 counties that exist in Florida. And the problem is that when you're talking about 480 municipalities, you can't come up with one rule to fit all. And I think until they understand our job, do they really have an understanding. But there's this, let's be more efficient mentality. And in local government, we're trying to understand what the constituent wants. So it's hard for them who aren't boots on the ground. I mean, no disrespect to them, they have a really important job, but I'm the closest to you, the people. So they don't come here to listen to the intricate items you may want to discuss, and we drill down on those things. That's my challenge with them, and I've always shared with our delegation, and having worked with several different members of the delegation over the 19 years, you start to understand what it is. That's why I deal with hurricane, that's why I was the chairman of the recovery. When you're around long enough, and you know a lot of legislators, it helps a great deal. And we're just having common sense conversations. And I appreciate the fact that they're looking for us to be efficient. But if you want to come and spend a day in the life of Kevin Ruane or in the county, then you could understand what I'm doing and then see if the same rule you're trying to handcuff me with applies. That's one of the challenges you have. And listen, I know number 4 is home rule, but for the 19 years I've been in office, I'd like to just say to them, stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. And we could work together when we need to work together, but try not to overstep and have us come in local government. It just doesn't work. And most can accept that in a very efficient way, in a productive way, if you could do it in a diplomatic way. So it's challenging because they still want us to bow and, you know, make sure we respect their title. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it's just a whole different world that they live in than we live in. And I just don't know one rule to fit 480 municipalities in the state of Florida applies. No problem. Any other questions on that topic? Water quality is the third one, and you know, as anyone that's known me, I've tried to do what I can on water quality. The governor is more in favor of coming up and setting aside big dollar amounts when it comes to really storage. You know, whether it's, you know, C-43 or C-44 or Flowway South, but there's not any real dollars ever been allocated to septic to sewer conversions. And that's probably the biggest thing that we need to try to deal with water quality when it comes down to it. I've met with this group and other groups in Pine Island before, and the request, even when I was first running, is that people would like us to somehow be able to do septic to sewer conversions at no cost to the homeowner. I don't know how to do that. And there's not a program around, because at $50,000 or $60,000 a conversion, and when you look at the number of properties that truly need to be converted, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So I don't know where that comes from. Water quality is also an area of why we like 2020, I go back to it, is the more lands we have in 2020, the less I have to worry about. So we're always looking at development, overdevelopment, to try to enhance water quality. But the issues you have with water quality, you know, we try to come up with fertilizer, you know, because there's water quality and water quantity. So quantity is always where the governor puts his money to have storage capacities, because those are the important projects. And the integrated delivery schedule, which identifies all the 67 projects that are in place right now to help us with storage, is about 70% complete. So all the funding he's done has enabled us to move that along, but there's not really any significant. Now, we have positioned very quickly, as we didn't have a storm this year, our federal legislators were going to be going to Washington to try to get the bigger money that's available, because it's not from the state. The state just doesn't have the pocketbook. And the governor now is trying to eliminate even simple things like property taxes, which everybody wants. Listen, who doesn't want lower property taxes? Okay? But at the end of,
I don't know, I like having some services that
well, I mean, that's one of the things that we fight with and challenge when there's 8 different bills up at the legislature to talk about how do you reduce property taxes. We're all for that, but the better question is, how are you going to let local government fund to provide the services that our constituents are used to?
so we could raise impact fees.
Well, impact fees, listen, if I thought there was 2 other people to raise impact fees, I would never have that problem. I think you could have a discussion when we have a 5th commissioner, when the governor gets around to appointing a 5th commissioner, because right now having 4 commissioners is a challenge. And if you work with the commissioners, and I've only been there 5 years, so Cecil and Brian have been there 12, and David's there about a year. So you try to understand where votes were, and not that I would give away my hand, but Mike was certainly someone that would agree with me more than not, and Brian was the other person. So I can get to 3 pretty quickly. I don't believe, considering Cecil and Brian put the restrictions into impact fees, that there's even a second vote up there, nor less a third. And unfortunately, I don't even know if David could vote on that, since he's a developer theoretically.
So it's a good reminder that as county residents, we vote for all the commissioners, not just the ones who
Well, that's probably going to change, unfortunately, because the legislature's already passed, and they're looking for single-member districts. And quite frankly, I would prefer to work in a single-member district. I really would. Then you have one person accountable for your area who's here, that shows up here. And I appreciate the fact that my commissioners have really jurisdiction over the entire county, but the reality is I can't be in 850,000 residents of Lee County. I can't be in 843 square miles. It's just too hard to do, and having a single member district enables me to concentrate on my district. And we do, but at the end of the day, I'll hear commissioners indicate that they want to obviously do countywide. My district also brings in 40% of the taxes, so that's why everyone wants to have countywide, because you can go to District 1, who just have a tendency to pay more taxes, so there's more opportunity to raise money to go run for your campaign. It's never been my priority, since I've never taken a dime in the 19 years I've been doing this, so it's not about money, and I've never taken, whatever pay I get goes to Pine Island Shelter, Community Cooperative. Every dime I've ever received has been donated, so I don't do this for money. It's really to give back to the community. It's something I'm proud of, and it's very, very transparent what I do. Then I'm not beheld to anyone. So when you want to look at impact fees, no problem. If you want to do whatever, and quite frankly, if I lose an election, having run for 6, we're okay with that too. If the citizens believe that there's someone better, then so be it.
I have a question going back to water quality
Yes, ma'am.
and septic. I certainly understand the issue about a major conversion for everyone to go to sewer system. On the other hand, there are things that could be done and should be done for inspecting old septic tanks and systems. When houses sell, that could be part of the condition of sale.
Absolutely.
I mean, the effluent that was seen when I called the county commissioner's office after Hurricane Ian, and since then after Helene and Milton, you know, when everybody was underwater, and everybody pretty much on the island is on septic of some kind, either an advanced one or the old-fashioned kind. Well, what's to be done? And well, that's the health department's issue.
So what happened in 2014, it was on the books. If you transferred a piece of real estate before it transferred hands, you'd have to have it inspected and receive a certification. Legislature changed that in 2014, took that off the books.
Right.
So one of the things we're trying to talk about now, when I said off session, is to try to have some of those safeguards back in place. But that's why we run into this home rule issue, because
Yes.
they basically are listening to people that come up to Tallahassee. They don't have the same restrictions I do as far as raising money and doing the things they can do. So it's an issue that I have to live with, although they made the rule to take away the inspection process that was in place some 11 years ago. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I've advocated to, even when I talked to the delegation, to have that rule back in place, because I think any time a property, my initial submission, both to the Senate and the House, was within 5 years, whether it changed hands or not, we should have the right to inspect properties, especially anyone that is in any type of septic area whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the
So-
things that I'd like to continue to focus on, because as much as everyone talks about $650 or $700 million the governor allocates, it's not like $250 million is for septic to sewer.
Right.
So to your point, if I could identify the leaches and the breaches we're having, where you're having that impact water quality, we could use those, and we have enough maps where we have the hot areas, we would inspect those first.
Yes.
And the areas that don't have as much concern. Because Dr. LaPointe is someone that's worked very closely with us over the years, and he's done an awful lot of updated studies where we almost know about 60 or 70% of the hot zones that there are, and it would probably be updated, but I agree with you 100%.
And I know that the Calusa Waterkeepers did a presentation to the city of Fort Myers today on the issues within city, you know, right next to the hospital and the high school and everything else. So if there's things that we can do as citizens to keep pushing that issue with our state legislatures.
Right to your state legislators, indicate that you believe in inspections, you're in an island with septic tanks, you know, we would like to have inspections put back in the process. By all means, you're the voice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, they represent you as well. I need to understand, because when I tell them it's I'm a politician asking for something. When you tell them you're the constituent that puts them in office.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on water quality? Home rule. God, I could talk about this all night. So, you know, the issue that I started to indicate earlier is, so unfortunately, SB 180 came through. And some of the things sorry, my phone was just ringing. One of the things with the intent of SB 180 was to try to control, or, you know, to obviously put some, you know, just some structure in after storms. There was concern about that. I think it went far too far. It went too far. So when you look at some of the issues it was intended to, there's at least over 100 lawsuits pending right now on SB 180. So we work in conjunction with the Florida League of Counties, and then there's the Florida League of Cities. So the 67 counties have one body called the Florida Association of Counties, and then the Florida League of Cities represents the 413. But we are certainly working with Manatee, Sarasota, and a whole bunch of other communities where we're certainly really willing and able to be a participant, but those lawsuits were filed. So to add on to be a participant takes some doing. And obviously, since the issue is near and dear to our hearts, we go and listen to the presentations and what's going on. This is going to be an issue that I think the legislators will understand, and there'll have to be some compromise. I think the intent was to try to give people the opportunity to fix after a storm. I think it just went too far. And there's not a county commissioner that doesn't really want a legislator to stay out of home rule in general, because you have issues that go too far, like Senate Bill 180, that just runs into issues that we're having. And it's a great time, thank God we didn't have a storm this year, to talk about these issues, because you're not in this crisis mode where people are obviously saying, I need to get back my home, no matter what it is. And it's a lot easier to have a civil conversation when there's not the anxiety, because the last couple of years, all we were talking about is how do we get more money, how do I pick up debris, how do I do these things, and how do I have lower taxes? But it's great if we could have another year where we could have significant conversations about, because right now the legislature is not really handing out money. The governor's trying to find ways to reduce revenue, so he's got to reduce expenses as well. When you go up there, you're basically told what type of budget they're going to have for 67 counties, 413 cities. So it has been reduced probably by 400 or 500%, the amount that was done. Because there was a lot of money that we received from the federal government after the pandemic. Then there was a lot of aid, obviously, a result of the storms. But when you're not in a storm year, the funding goes dramatically down. And that's one of the challenges you have in trying to do this. So we're trying to come up with things that don't cost money, that make more practical sense, because I'm not asking you for money. I'm asking you to make considerations and adjustments to legislation you passed that would have more meaningful impact to us. So it's a lot easier when you go to legislate and you're not asking for money in some tough years. I always tell people when interest rates are getting cut, it doesn't mean the economy's doing better, it's doing worse. And they're probably gonna do another cut in December. So when you look at those times, I've always found it easy to ask legislators during some challenging times, having gotten office in 2007 when the economy was really in some trouble, asking for things that don't have a price tag associated with them. I look forward to that, and as someone that certainly has spent more hours than any commissioner, all the 4 commissioners combined, up in Tallahassee, I look forward to having those conversations, because I'd like to try to have some type of respect for what their job is, but more importantly, what my job is as well. So I don't know what else to say on home rule about that, but we could talk about it all night long, because I've fought home rule since I got in office back in '07. It's just one that one size doesn't fit all. And there's a reason we go in through county helping constituents, cities helping constituents, because we know what you'd want. And I don't think you pick the phone up when you have an issue to your state legislator. You'll generally call your obviously your county representative, or if you're in a city where it's government, you'll cover your city representative. But I don't know that the legislators have an appreciation for the day-to-day things that we do. So that's just an issue we have. So any issues, anything that wants to talk about home rule?
Can I just clarify to make sure I'm understanding? So even though, as the county, we are not going to be filing an official lawsuit, you're still active in fighting it. Is that correct?
So through the Florida County Association, they represent all 67 counties. So when you file a lawsuit, you have a period of time to be a participant. Okay? It's active, it's there. I know the commissioners from Manatee, I sit with them on the West Inland Navigation District. We talk about it all the time, but again, if you want some support, you want some dollars, you want to help offset it, just let us know what that is. But they're advocating for the same things we are. At the end of the day, but probably the biggest active group is 1,000 Friends of Florida, which is the biggest nonprofit group that is funding that. And you have that, you have the Everglades Foundation, you have some real people with like Paul Tudor Jones behind the Everglades, that's a billionaire that's throwing $1 billion here and $1 billion there. It's a lot easier to fight for things when you have that type of backing in certain things. And that's what they try to do. So I'm confident in the way this will come out. Now, unfortunately, court systems and litigation takes longer than you'd like it to be. But it's certainly in the process, and I'll certainly keep you updated as we are. But I am certainly more than willing to certainly take a stance on that Senate Bill 180. It may not necessarily be the best thing to do when you're going up and advocating for other things, because sometimes they get very temperamental when you challenge their authority. So it's just a conversation that we could respectfully just disagree with one another. Try to understand that. The last issue is Tourist Development Council, and it basically says related to rebuilding the Pineland Post Office. So I'm not allowed to use Tourist Development Council money for anything unless it promotes tourism. So I don't know exactly what the group would like me to talk about.
That was just the question, is can that money be used?
No, so the Tourist Development Council, also known as the TDC, is bed tax is something that has 5 pennies to it. 2.5 pennies go to marketing, 1.5 pennies go to beach and shorelines, and 1 penny goes to attractions. Everything has to have a legislative finding when you are actually promoting tourism. So it'd be a hard legislative finding, and I don't think they would pass, saying there's a legislative finding that one can say that tourism would improve if you rebuilt a post office. And the other issue that we have is, honestly, when you think about it's the United States Post Office, is the county commissioner doesn't have nearly the impact as maybe Congressman Donalds, Senator Scott.
It's my understanding that's a county building, though.
But it's still still United States Post Office. So although we might own the building, the tenant has rights, unfortunately, and the tenant has to improve it because our lease specifically says the improvements are supposed to be done by them.
So we should be complaining to that.
I mean, the people that have the greatest influence are certainly a federal entity dealing with a federal legislator. Unfortunately, I'm a couple of pegs down on the ladder to actually have any real influence. I mean, Senator Scott probably is the longest serving person who was our governor and certainly is there. And I will tell you, he is very approachable. Byron certainly is great, but I think he is certainly busy doing his job as a congressman and certainly running to be your next governor. So I don't know. You know, it's an issue that I'm aware of and certainly have been brought up to speed on it and some of the challenges we're having, but I can't find a creative way to use Tourist Development Council dollars to do that. Yeah, listen, and listen, it's, you know, unless you do it on a regular basis and having sat on the TDC for 10 years and then chaired it, you really don't understand how we collect the money and how I can utilize it, because I'm asked a lot of times, because of other reserves we have, that reserve is greater than our total budget for the TDC. So you always want to utilize reserves that you have. But the problem you have with reserves is I have to spend it on advertising, beach and shoreline, or attractions. Those are the only things I'm allowed to use the money for. That's the challenge I have. But we probably have about $60 million in a $40 million budget in reserves. So, you know, so if a lot of our reserves were that high, we would do great. Any other questions that I can answer?
Open forum?
Listen,
I do have one kind of tangential question on tourist development. I'm taking a course out on Sanibel, and one of the things that they mentioned is a lot of tourist development money has been used for the beach renourishment projects on Captiva and Sanibel.
mm-hmm.
And then they also went on, this is SCCF is involved, in Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. They also mentioned that they were, had some staff that were paid to track the effect of beach renourishment on sea turtle nesting and making sure that the sea turtles weren't affected. But they also said there was absolutely no money for research coming out of tourist development money to deal with, for example, the impact of beach renourishment on the nesting. So my question is, can tourist development money be used to find the best way to do some of these projects through a research grant, or no?
No, so research does not promote tourism.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought.
It's
Thank you.
really a narrow window in Tourist Development Council that you have. And we've tried many different ways to do that, because as a county commissioner, I don't believe reserves should be there and continue to grow, trying to find ways to use them.
Mhm.
But we are really restricted when it comes to TDC. Yes,
Quick
sir.
question on code enforcement.
Yes.
I have a neighbor who bought a house across the canal
Mm-hmm.
after the storm and has used it as a commercial launch. I've made 3 or 4 complaints to code and compliance. Mr. Diaz was here. He said, make sure you copy me on it. Tell me the times that they're doing it, and I have done that. I've sent video. It always comes back as no code enforcement. This is 6 or 8, 10 people in a boat going out, loads and loads of trees and appliances out to Captiva. I know who the guy is, and he's one of the managers out in Upper Cap, and I cannot get any traction to stop this. A lot of commercial launches around that he could rent, and I'm tired of it, but I'm getting no help at all from code enforcement.
Can you do me a favor?
Yeah,
Can you contact Pamela Smith, 533?
I'd be happy to. She's wonderful.
And just give her the address,
Yep,
and I certainly will make a personal visit. I have no
Okay.
problem with that. You do have to catch them in the act.
I understand that,
But it,
yeah.
well, again,
Yeah.
give us the address,
And I
listen.
told Mr. Diaz at
I was
times,
trying
and
to ask Mr. Diaz today in
Okay.
a workshop
All right.
on code enforcement, how do we help the
All right,
situation?
good, thank you. That's the easy question.
Okay.
The second question is on the private sewer utility on the island. I spoke with the owner after the storm. I said, why don't you run the sewer line down and get us off? I live in Flamingo Bay, so we lost about a third of the houses in there. I said, bring the sewer in now, get us off septic. He says, oh, I can't do that. I can't possibly do that till 2036. I don't know what the date is or why it was important to him, but is Lee County looking to take that over to take and let's get this sewer in place? I know it costs money, but you know what? That's a lot better than having the sewer leaching into the sound.
We're always open to looking at opportunities to do anything like that. We have to have a willing seller that's willing to give us, a fair price, and we're able to do something.
Okay.
Water quality has a lot of opportunities, so again, there is ways to use reserves if we could make a case that we're buying a property for the proper price, and we could do those things. So
Okay.
I'm open to doing that for certain.
All right. Thank you so much.
No
Appreciate it.
problem. Any other questions?
I had a question. Could you comment on the potential funding for an EMS station out here on Pine Island?
So it certainly has been brought to our attention. So for people that aren't aware, we received a little over $1 billion for community block development grant, and that was for housing and infrastructure. What we're finding is as economy slowed down is there's 6 years from when we were awarded the money that the project has to be built and occupied. We're having people like Goodwill and others give us back the money because they can't find the funding. To bore you for a minute, to come up with any type of funding that we use block grants for, it basically is a stack of funding. So development might cost $60 million, of which we're giving $10 million of it. And they have 5 other participants give the other $10 million. So you might have, they're putting in money, the Florida Housing Corporation may put in money, you might have UBS saying the tax credits are worthwhile. You then have to get a bond, municipal bond. So there's various players. What we're finding as the economy has slowed down is we're not going to develop those. So we're going to have about $200 million that's going to be repurposed. So our choices are either housing or infrastructure. So as there's not enough demand for housing, there's going to be an opportunity for infrastructure, and your certainly the chief and others here have indicated we're trying to make EMS a priority, and that's been something the commissioner said, safety and welfare is that. We've allocated an awful lot of money. I do believe that's on the top of the list as we reappropriate the money. There'll be, like I said, January is the cutoff that you either have to show us that you have all the pieces to your funding set up for housing, or we're going to take away the award. And right now, since I'm the chair of that, right now it looks like there's going to be in excess of $200 million. So we have an awful lot of opportunities. Again, Sandoval put in for a fire station. We've done some EMSs. So there is, I would say it's a high probability that will take place. But it's a complicated situation. People were basically telling us today that we're not being true to what the mission is to have more affordable housing. I don't know what to tell you when the developer doesn't have confidence that they could develop it properly and have it occupied. You can't just build it. You have to make sure you can fill it. If you don't have the confidence, you're not going to do that. You want to have people like Goodwill Industries giving me back 2 grants that were excess of $30 million. It gives you an indication of the confidence they have in the development that's going on right now. So there will be some infrastructure dollars, and we're trying to find the most creative ways to do that, because we had the same time frame. By May of '29, it has to be built, done, and finalized, which doesn't seem like it's long away, but 3 years will go quickly. And most infrastructure projects take about a year. So we're trying to look at shovel-ready. That would certainly, there's plans, there's development orders, there's everything associated with that. So it would meet the criteria, and the last estimate I had was about 14 months it would take to build.
Leo Amos. Question.
Sure.
One of the things that I keep looking at when you talk about infrastructure is, I read the papers and I look at Cape Coral, when the commissioners can't come to grips with a $200 billion deficit for roads for the coming years to put impact fees on. So I understand that they did nothing. So now they don't want to raise impact fees to build the roads, and already Pine Island Road's a mess, and it's just going to get worse. I mean, they built all these apartment buildings and no place to go. So what is the overall view of the county in trying to help the people in Cape Coral help us so we can go to town, to Fort Myers or wherever else, and get through Cape Coral?
So the conversation that we're having, so impact fees, even if funded at 100%, wouldn't get the job done. The development that we had. I am certainly one that has brought up and will continue to bring up a sales tax, which will be voted on by the voters. Sales tax would give us a revenue stream for the next 10 years that we leverage and take care of probably 75% of our infrastructure projects. We have not raised a millage rate in Lee County in over 30 years. We haven't raised any enterprise funds in over 30 years. So the issue you have is how do you pay for, and it's not $200 million. When you look at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, we're over $1 billion underfunded. That's the reality of where we are in infrastructure. So we need to come up with some creative way, and I'm not saying that impact fees, but the other problem you have with impact fees, if there's a problem, is it has to be spent in the area where the impact fee is collected. So right now, a lot of our impact right now is on the Lico Road. I can't take money in impact fees because you can't move it. Not mobile, it's not portable. So mobility fees give you the flexibility of moving money. Sales tax would just give us, because the other issue we have is that we have approximately 300,000 people that come here in the wintertime that aren't property owners, that clog our roadways, that use our infrastructure, and do not pay for it. So the fairest way, I believe, in the least impactful way, is to have an increase, 1 penny on sales tax. Again, it's for the voters. 60% of people have to say yes. But I don't have, if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have a way to pay for our infrastructure because I believe some of the decisions that were made that weren't 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years outlooked. Nobody really looked at revenue projections like I would do in corporate America and say, okay, we're going to have a shortfall. You can't continue to have, you know, even simple things. I mean, I'm talking to people in Cape Coral, like, you can't raise the bridge up. The bridge is $1. It was instituted in 1993. I don't know what has not gone up in 32 years. And we now have 2 lanes on the Cape Coral Bridge on the north side and the south side, and 2 lanes on the Midpoint Bridge on the north and south side. That's going to cost $1 billion. I don't know how to do that with just $1 toll. And that's the reality. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you something that you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth. And I believe that with not looking at long-term plans, I think we've run into some funding issues that we have. And I don't know what this sediment was when we did impact fees, but right now impact fees can only go up by 2.5%. And based on the projections that I've seen, it would not put a dent in what our infrastructure needs are.
Thank you. We're going to wrap it up. We appreciate.
No problem.
It's getting late, and we really appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Carol Scott, as we know. I want to, on behalf of the Matlacha Islanders and the Matlacha Civic Association, I would like to express our gratitude to you and all of our commissioners, the Planning, Zoning, and Visitors Convention Bureau. We've had huge progress in restoration and more resilient Matlacha. Lee County Parks and Recs has been working hard to restore both the Bat House Park and the Matlacha Community Park. We get so many compliments on the mural at the Bat House Park with the bright colored fish. We get so many people coming and taking pictures with it. The island is pleased to see the restoration of our park grounds, the pier, and finally we see the civic building soon to be reopened after its restoration. So we're very grateful for that. The demolition of 3 dangerous buildings is now completed. These buildings have been the heartache and the sadness and daily reminders I'm good, of the destruction at Ian and Helene and Milton. With these buildings down, one approaches the gateway of Matlacha and sees a breathtaking view of Matlacha Pass, the waters that we are known for. The view is now open and clean and bright. It's a bright, happy smile and welcomes everyone. Sorry. It welcomes everyone to Matlacha, to the shops, the boutiques, and restaurants. We are now able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Island residents are looking forward to our continuous partnership for cleanup and improvements. We thank you, Commissioner Ruane.
Thank you, Carol. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, we just have a few community announcements. The Adopt a Road is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Reminder that the ongoing Calusa Land Trust parties in the preserves. Matlacha has a couple of events coming up on the 14th and 20th, as you can see there. Carol, where is the Christmas Village going to be?
At where the old loblolly,
Okay.
next door to the new menagerie.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. And then this weekend is the Beacon of Hope annual House of Hope at the Tarpon Lodge. So just a few updates there. We just want to say thank you everyone again for coming tonight. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to everyone. Our next meeting is January 6th. Again, a huge thank you to Commissioner Ruane, who has agreed to stay back with us for a little bit longer if anyone has any specific questions. And with that, I will say that if there's any other comments or anything that the group wants to ask.
Will we adjourn?
That's what we're doing, as long as no one else has anything. Okay. Okay, anyone opposed? Thank you, everyone.